A monster? Under my bed.
What do your parents think about monsters? Do they believe in them?
Did you know? Is that enough to kill a monster?
What makes you think I kill monsters?
You seem like you killed all it thinks.
She believe in monsters.
You're a monster. She believe in you.
A monster didn't need your parents. Those were men that came to kill me. Why would a monster eat your family? Have you seen something you shouldn't have seen?
I know it's real.
You think you know.
You think you know.
Her being here won't stop them. They will go right through her.
You seem triggered. You got the girl?
I got the gun.
What if the monster under your bed was real? What if the only person willing to help you fight it was a professional assassin? That strange but fascinating idea sits at the heart of Dust Bunny 2025, a fantasy action horror film that feels like a bedtime story, a dark fairy tale, and an emotional character drama all at the same time. Directed by Brian Fuller in his feature film debut, the movie takes audiences into a world where childhood fears collide with adult violence, where grief wears the face of monsters, and where unlikely friendships become the strongest weapon against darkness. The result is one of the most unusual films of 2025. It is not simply a horror movie, it is not just an action film, it is not even only a fantasy adventure. Instead, it blends all these elements together into something that feels both nostalgic and fresh. For viewers familiar with Fuller's television work, the film carries many of the visual and emotional trademarks that made his earlier projects memorable. At the same time, it introduces a cinematic voice that feels ambitious, personal, and surprisingly heartfelt. The story follows Aurora, a young girl convinced that a monster living beneath her bed has devoured her family. Desperate for help, she turns to her mysterious neighbor, a hitman known only as Resident 5B. What begins as a seemingly impossible mission gradually unfolds into something far more complex. Questions about reality, trauma, memory, and survival emerge as the pair navigate a dangerous world filled with assassins, secrets, and creatures that may or may not be real. One of the most interesting aspects of Dust Bunny is how long the project spent developing before reaching theaters. The concept reportedly existed for years before becoming a feature film. Early versions were connected to ideas for anthology television projects, but the story eventually evolved into a standalone movie. This lengthy development period allowed Fuller to refine the narrative and shape it into a deeply personal project. The film became not only his directorial debut but also a creative statement about the kinds of stories he wanted to tell on the big screen. The casting process played a major role in defining the movie's identity. From the beginning, Fuller reportedly envisioned Mads Mikkelsen as the central figure. Their creative partnership dates back to their collaboration on the television series Hannibal, where Mikkelsen delivered one of the most celebrated performances of his career. Fuller believed Mikkelsen could bring a unique combination of menace, sadness, humor, and humanity to the role of Resident 5B. Rather than portraying a conventional action hero, Mikkelsen creates a character who appears emotionally distant yet gradually reveals layers of compassion beneath his hardened exterior. Mikkelsen's presence gives the film much of its emotional weight. His character could easily have become a stereotypical hitman, but the actor's restrained performance transforms him into something more interesting. He rarely speaks more than necessary, yet his expressions communicate entire conversations. Through subtle gestures and carefully measured reactions, he conveys guilt, loneliness, and a quiet desire for redemption. Equally important is the performance of young actress Sophie Sloane as Aurora. Carrying a major film at such a young age is a difficult challenge, yet Sloane manages to become the emotional center of the story. Aurora is frightened but determined, vulnerable but brave. She never feels like a typical movie child. Instead, she feels like a real young person struggling to make sense of an impossible situation. Many viewers and critics highlighted Sloane's performance as one of the film's strongest elements. The relationship between Aurora and Resident 5B drives the narrative forward. On paper, the pairing sounds unusual. A lonely child and a professional killer working together to hunt monsters. Yet the movie gradually develops their connection in ways that feel believable. They are both isolated individuals carrying emotional wounds. Aurora has lost her family, while Resident 5B carries the burden of a violent past. Their growing trust becomes the emotional foundation of the story. The supporting cast adds further depth to the film. Sigourney Weaver brings authority and charisma to her role, while David Dastmalchian contributes another memorable performance. Sheila Atim also provides strong support, helping populate the film's strange and often dangerous world. Together, the ensemble creates a cast that feels distinctive and memorable. One of Fuller's biggest strengths as a storyteller has always been his ability to balance darkness with beauty. That skill is on full display throughout Dust Bunny. The film contains violence, danger, and horror, yet it also embraces wonder, imagination, and even humor. This tonal balancing act is difficult to achieve. Lean too far toward horror and the emotional core disappears. Lean too far toward fantasy and the stakes lose their impact. Fuller manages to keep both sides working together. Visually, the movie creates a world that feels slightly detached from reality. The environments often resemble storybook locations rather than ordinary places. Colors appear more vibrant than expected. Objects sometimes seem exaggerated or stylized. This aesthetic approach reinforces the idea that viewers are experiencing events through the lens of childhood imagination. The world feels familiar yet dreamlike, grounded yet magical. The cinematography by Nicole Hirsch Whitaker contributes significantly to this atmosphere. Many scenes use carefully controlled lighting and composition to create a sense of mystery. Shadows become characters of their own. Hallways appear longer than they should. Bedrooms transform into spaces where anything might happen. The camera often adopts Aurora's perspective, encouraging audiences to share her uncertainty about what is real and what is imagined. Creature design is another standout aspect of the production. The monsters in Dust Bunny avoid looking like generic horror creatures. Instead, they possess qualities that make them simultaneously frightening and strangely sympathetic. Fuller reportedly wanted audiences to feel conflicted about the creatures they encounter. This ambiguity adds complexity to the narrative because viewers are never entirely sure who or what should be feared. The film's action sequences also deserve attention. While the story contains fantasy and horror elements, it frequently shifts into action territory. Assassins pursue characters through stylized environments. Confrontations erupt unexpectedly. Chases and shootouts provide bursts of energy between quieter emotional scenes. Yet, even during these moments, the movie remains focused on character rather than spectacle. The editing by Lisa Lasek helps maintain this balance. The pacing moves steadily between suspense, action, comedy, and drama without feeling chaotic. Scenes are given enough room to breathe emotionally while still maintaining narrative momentum. Music plays an essential role in shaping the film's identity. Composer Isabella Summers creates a score that blends wonder with unease. Rather than relying entirely on traditional horror techniques, the music often emphasizes emotion and atmosphere. Gentle melodies can suddenly transform into darker arrangements, reflecting the film's constant movement between fantasy and fear. Thematically, Dust Bunny explores several ideas beneath its entertaining surface. One of the most obvious themes is childhood fear. Most people remember being afraid of something hidden in the dark when they were young. The movie takes those fears seriously rather than treating them as jokes. It acknowledges that childhood anxieties can feel as real and overwhelming as any adult problem. Another major theme involves grief. Aurora's journey is not simply about fighting monsters. It is about processing loss and understanding what has happened to her family. The film frequently uses fantasy elements as metaphors for emotional experiences. Monsters become representations of pain, loneliness, and unresolved trauma. Isolation is another recurring idea. Many characters in the story feel disconnected from others. Resident 5B lives alone. Aurora struggles with unimaginable loss. Even some supporting characters appear trapped by circumstances beyond their control. The movie suggests that connection and understanding are powerful tools against fear. The film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival before receiving a theatrical release later in 2025. Festival audiences were particularly interested in seeing how Fuller would transition from television to feature filmmaking. The premiere generated significant discussion because it represented the culmination of years of anticipation among fans of his previous work. Critical reception was generally positive. Many reviewers praised the film's originality, visual style, performances, and emotional ambition. Some critics felt certain narrative elements could have been developed further, but even mixed reviews often acknowledged the movie's creativity and distinctive voice. Viewers who appreciated unusual genre films frequently found much to enjoy. Audience reactions proved similarly interesting. Online discussions revealed strong enthusiasm among many viewers who appreciated the film's blend of fairy tale storytelling and horror. Some described it as the kind of imaginative genre movie that rarely receives major studio support. Others compared it to classic fantasy adventures that balance darkness with wonder. A number of fans even predicted that the film could develop a cult following over time. Commercially, the film was not a major blockbuster. However, box office numbers do not always determine a movie's long-term reputation. Many beloved cult classics initially struggled financially before finding larger audiences through home viewing and streaming. Dust Bunny possesses several qualities commonly associated with future cult favorites: a distinctive visual style, unusual premise, memorable characters, and passionate fan support. Awards recognition further strengthened the film's reputation. It received attention from genre focused organizations and independent film circles, earning nominations and wins that highlighted its artistic achievements. Such recognition helped introduce the movie to viewers who may have missed its theatrical release. Internet culture also contributed to the movie's visibility. Fans created artwork, discussions, theories, and memes centered on its strange premise. The concept of hiring a hitman to kill a monster under a bed naturally lends itself to humorous reinterpretations. At the same time, the emotional sincerity of the film encouraged deeper analysis and discussion. One reason the movie resonates with audiences is its refusal to fully explain everything. Fuller trusts viewers to interpret certain elements for themselves. Are the monsters entirely real? Are some manifestations symbolic? Different audience members may reach different conclusions. This ambiguity encourages repeated viewings and ongoing discussion. Looking back at Dust Bunny, what stands out most is its willingness to take creative risks. In an era when many genre films follow familiar formulas, the movie embraces originality. It combines elements that should not necessarily work together: a child protagonist, a hitman hero, fairy tale imagery, horror creatures, emotional drama, and action spectacle, yet somehow creates a surprisingly cohesive experience. The film may not appeal to everyone. Its unusual tone and stylized approach will naturally divide audiences. Some viewers prefer straightforward storytelling, while Dust Bunny often embraces mystery and symbolism. But for those willing to enter its strange world, the movie offers a rewarding and memorable journey. Ultimately, Dust Bunny is a story about confronting fear. It reminds audiences that monsters come in many forms. Some hide beneath beds, others exist inside memories, regrets, and painful experiences. The courage to face those monsters, whether real or symbolic, becomes the film's central message. For Brian Fuller, the movie represents a successful transition into feature filmmaking. For Mads Mikkelsen and Sophie Sloan, it provides an opportunity to create one of the year's most unusual cinematic partnerships. And for audiences, it offers a dark fairy tale that lingers in the imagination long after the credits roll. It may be about monsters, assassins, and impossible adventures, but at its heart, Dust Bunny is about finding hope in the darkest places and discovering that sometimes the people who save us are just as lost as we are. As the story of Dust Bunny 2025 expands, what becomes increasingly clear is that the film is not just built around its plot, but around its emotional contradictions. It is a film that constantly pulls in two opposite directions at the same time: innocence and brutality, imagination and realism, childhood fear and adult guilt. This tension is what shapes every performance and every creative decision behind the camera. Much of the film's identity comes from the casting choices, which feel deliberately precise rather than random. The central role of the hitman is played with a controlled intensity that never slips into exaggeration. The character is not written as a traditional action hero nor as a cold villain. Instead, he exists in a strange emotional middle space. He is someone who has seen too much violence to react to it emotionally, yet still carries fragments of humanity that refuse to fully disappear. The actor's performance leans heavily on silence. He speaks less than expected, but every small movement feels meaningful. A glance, a pause, or even the way he stands in a room communicates more than dialogue ever could. This creates a character who feels emotionally sealed off on the surface but deeply fractured underneath. The audience is not invited into his thoughts easily. Instead, they are forced to interpret him through behavior, which makes him more mysterious and more realistic at the same time. Opposite him, the young girl at the center of the story becomes the emotional engine of the film. Her performance is built on fear that never feels artificial. She does not behave like a child trying to act brave. She behaves like someone who genuinely believes the world is unsafe in ways adults refuse to acknowledge. That belief shapes everything she does. When she speaks about the monster, there is no hesitation in her voice. It is not a metaphor for her, it is a fact. What makes her portrayal especially powerful is the balance between vulnerability and determination. She is not passive, she pushes the story forward. She makes decisions that force the adult character into action. In many ways, she is the one who disrupts his emotional isolation, not by force but by persistence. Her presence is like a crack forming in a wall that has been standing for years. The supporting characters add another layer of tension to the world. They are not simply background figures. Each one feels like they are connected to a larger hidden system within the story. Some appear briefly and vanish, leaving behind a sense of unanswered questions. Others reappear in unexpected ways, suggesting that nothing in this world is truly isolated. Even minor characters feel like they are carrying secrets. From a development perspective, the film carries the feeling of something that was carefully built over time rather than rushed. The concept itself feels simple at first, a child, a monster, and a hitman, but the execution reveals a much more layered structure underneath. It is clear that the idea evolved, slowly becoming more complex as emotional themes were added on top of the original fantasy horror concept. The creative direction seems focused on one central idea: fear is not always something external. Sometimes fear is inherited, sometimes it is taught, and sometimes it is the only language a traumatized mind knows how to use when reality becomes unbearable. This idea shapes not just the story but the tone of every scene. Production design plays a major role in reinforcing this feeling. The environments are not overly fantastical, but they are slightly distorted in a way that makes them feel unfamiliar. Rooms feel too quiet, hallways feel too long. Even ordinary houses seem to hold a strange stillness, as if the world itself is waiting for something to happen. This subtle distortion is what makes the film unsettling even in calm moments. Lighting is used in a way that avoids realism in favor of emotional atmosphere. Shadows often feel heavier than they should. Corners of room appear darker than logic would suggest. Daylight is soft but not comforting. Instead of making things clear, the light often feels like it is hiding something in plain sight. The creature concept in the film is especially interesting because it avoids standard horror design. Instead of focusing on shock value or grotesque detail, the creatures feel symbolic. They are not always shown clearly, and when they are, they carry a strange ambiguity. They might be physical beings, or they might be manifestations of emotional damage. The film refuses to settle this question, and that refusal becomes part of its identity. This uncertainty also affects how action scenes are constructed. Violence is not treated as spectacle alone. Every confrontation feels emotionally loaded. When characters fight or run, it is never just about survival in a physical sense. It is also about confronting internal fears that have taken external form. This blending of psychological and physical conflict makes the action feel heavier than typical genre films. As the relationship between the child and the hitman deepens, the film begins to shift in tone. Early scenes are colder and more detached, but later moments become unexpectedly emotional. This shift is not sudden, it happens gradually through shared experiences, failures, and moments of silence where neither character knows how to express what they are feeling. The hitman's emotional transformation is particularly subtle. He does not suddenly become warm or openly expressive. Instead, his changes are almost invisible unless closely observed. He begins to hesitate in situations where he would have acted instantly before. He starts asking questions he previously ignored. He becomes less certain about the boundaries between reality and imagination. The child, on the other hand, becomes slightly more grounded as the story progresses, but she never fully abandons her belief in the monster. Instead, her understanding of it evolves. It becomes less of a simple fear and more of a complex symbol for everything she has lost. The monster is no longer just something under the bed, it becomes a representation of grief itself. This emotional evolution is what gives the film its depth. It is not about proving whether the monster exists. It is about understanding why the idea of the monster exists in the first place. Behind the scenes, the production tone of the film feels like a mix of controlled artistry and creative risk taking. There is a clear intention to avoid standard genre formulas. Instead of relying on predictable beats, the film often slows down at unexpected moments or shifts direction without warning. This unpredictability mirrors the emotional instability of the characters themselves. Even the pacing of the story reflects this approach. It does not rush toward answers, instead, it lingers in uncertainty. Some scenes feel deliberately extended, not to fill time but to allow emotional weight to settle. Silence is used as frequently as dialogue and sometimes more effectively. As the narrative continues deeper into its second half, the boundary between fantasy and reality becomes even harder to define. Characters begin to question their own experiences. Events that seemed clear earlier in the film are later reinterpreted in different ways. This creates a sense that the story itself is shifting while it is being told, and through all of this, the emotional core remains surprisingly consistent. It is a story about fear that cannot be explained, about loss that cannot be fully processed, and about two people trying to survive something that may not even have a name. As the film moves deeper into its structure, Dust Bunny 2025 begins to reveal that its most powerful storytelling tool is not its plot but its atmosphere. The way it looks, sounds, and feels often matters more than what is actually happening on screen. The cinematography plays a huge role in shaping this experience, creating a world that feels slightly out of step with reality, as if everything is happening inside a memory that refuses to fully fade away. The camera often lingers longer than expected on empty spaces. Hallways, bedrooms, staircases, and quiet corners of houses are shown in a way that makes them feel alive even when no one is there. This creates a constant sense of anticipation, as if something could appear at any moment, even if nothing actually does. The fear in the film is not always created by action, but by waiting. Lighting becomes almost emotional in its use. Instead of simply illuminating scenes, it shapes mood. Darkness is not just absence of light but a presence of its own. In many scenes, shadows feel more important than the characters themselves. Light sometimes spills into rooms in soft, unnatural ways, making the world feel slightly unreal, like a dream that is slowly breaking apart. One of the most interesting choices in the cinematography is how often the perspective feels tied to the child character. The camera sometimes sits low, almost at her eye level, which subtly changes how the world is perceived. Adults appear more distant, more imposing, and sometimes even distorted in their presence. This visual approach reinforces the emotional imbalance between childhood fear and adult logic. Sound design is equally important in building the film's atmosphere. Silence is used as a tool, not just an absence of sound. Long stretches of quiet allow tension to build naturally. When sound does appear, it often feels carefully placed rather than constant. A small creak, a distant noise, or an unclear whisper can become more frightening than loud effects. The music in the film works in contrast to the silence. It does not overwhelm scenes but instead flows beneath them like an emotional current. At times, it feels almost like a lullaby that has been slightly corrupted. Gentle melodies shift into darker tones without warning, reflecting the unstable emotional state of the story itself. The score often feels like it is reacting to the characters rather than guiding the audience, which makes it feel more intimate and unsettling at the same time. As the story continues, the idea of the monster becomes more layered and less literal. Early in the film, it appears to be a physical threat, something that could be hunted or confronted. But over time, it becomes clear that the monster is not confined to a single form. It changes depending on who is looking at it. For the child, it represents loss and fear of abandonment. For the hitman, it begins to resemble guilt and memory. For other characters, it becomes something undefined but deeply personal. This shifting identity of the monster is what keeps the film emotionally complex. It refuses to let the audience settle on one explanation. Instead, it encourages interpretation. The monster can be real and symbolic at the same time, or neither, depending on how the viewer chooses to understand it. The production design supports this ambiguity by keeping environments grounded but slightly off balance. Nothing is overly fantastical, yet nothing feels completely normal either. Furniture feels carefully placed but emotionally distant. Rooms feel lived in but not comforting. Even safe spaces carry a faint sense of unease, as if they are hiding something just out of sight. As the bond between the two central characters deepens, the film begins to explore a quieter kind of storytelling. Conversations become more meaningful not because of what is said, but because of what is left unsaid. The hitman, who initially speaks in short, controlled sentences, begins to show small cracks in his emotional armor. He still avoids vulnerability, but his actions begin to betray his internal shift. He lingers longer in conversations. He observes more carefully. He starts to protect not just physically but emotionally as well. The child also changes, but in a different direction. She does not lose her fear, but she begins to understand it differently. What once felt like a single terrifying presence starts to feel like something connected to her inner world. The monster becomes less of an enemy and more of a reflection. This realization does not remove her fear, but it changes its shape. One of the most striking aspects of the film's direction is its refusal to over explain. Many modern genre films rely on detailed explanations or clear resolutions, but Dust Bunny resists this instinct. It leaves emotional gaps intentionally. It trusts the audience to sit with uncertainty. This makes the viewing experience more personal because each viewer fills in those gaps differently. As tension builds in the later parts of the story, the boundary between external danger and internal emotion becomes almost invisible. Scenes that appear to be physical confrontations often carry emotional weight that feels just as important as the action itself. The film begins to suggest that fighting monsters is not about defeating something outside but about confronting something within. The editing style reinforces this idea by avoiding overly sharp transitions. Instead, scenes often flow into each other in a way that feels dreamlike. Time does not always feel linear. Some moments feel extended while others feel compressed. This creates a sense of emotional disorientation that mirrors the character's psychological states. The hitman's past is also gradually revealed in fragments rather than full exposition. These fragments do not provide a complete backstory, but instead offer emotional clues. It becomes clear that his detachment is not natural but learned. His silence is not emptiness but protection. The more the audience understands him, the more tragic his emotional distance becomes. At the same time, the child's perception of reality continues to blur. There are moments where what she sees may or may not be reliable. The film never confirms whether these moments are hallucinations, memories, or real events. This uncertainty is not a trick, but a central part of the storytelling approach. Reality in Dust Bunny is emotional rather than factual. As the film progresses toward its final act, it becomes less about discovering what the monster is and more about accepting what it represents. The emotional journey takes priority over explanation. Fear, grief, and memory become intertwined in a way that cannot be separated cleanly. What makes this section of the film particularly powerful is its restraint. Instead of escalating into constant chaos or spectacle, it often slows down at key emotional points. It allows silence, stillness, and reflection to carry weight. This creates a contrast with the earlier tension, making the emotional payoff feel more grounded. By this stage, the audience is no longer watching a simple story about a monster. They are watching a story about two damaged people trying to understand each other in a world that refuses to offer clear answers. And in that uncertainty, the film finds its true identity not as a horror story, not as an action story, but as something closer to a dark emotional fable about fear, connection, and the strange ways people survive what they cannot fully understand. As Dust Bunny 2025 approaches its final stretch, the film begins to tighten its emotional threads rather than expanding them further. Instead of introducing new ideas or new explanations, it circles back to everything it has already built: fear, grief, imagination, and the fragile connection between two people who should never have crossed paths but somehow did. The final act does not behave like a typical genre climax. There is action, yes, and there is danger, but the emotional focus never shifts away from the internal journey of the characters. What matters most is not what is being fought, but why the fight even exists in the first place. By this point, the idea of the monster has fully transformed. It is no longer just something the child believes in, it is no longer just a possible external threat. It has become a layered presence that exists differently depending on who is perceiving it. For the child, it still carries the weight of loss and fear. For the hitman, it begins to resemble a reflection of everything he has tried to suppress for years. For the audience, it becomes something intentionally undefined, a space where interpretation replaces certainty. The climax of the film does not attempt to resolve this ambiguity in a traditional way. Instead, it deepens it. When confrontation finally arrives, it feels less like the defeat of an enemy and more like an emotional release that has been building from the beginning. The visuals become more unstable, the sound design more fragmented, and the line between reality and perception grows thinner than ever. In these moments, the film leans heavily into emotional symbolism. Actions carry meaning beyond their physical form. A struggle is not just survival, it is acceptance. A moment of silence is not just pause, it is understanding. Even violence, when it appears, feels less like spectacle and more like emotional consequence. The hitman character reaches his most important turning point in this section. His emotional transformation does not happen through a single revelation but through accumulated experience. Throughout the film, he has been slowly forced to confront parts of himself that he has avoided for years. In the final act, those buried emotions surface fully. He is no longer just reacting to external events. He is finally facing the internal cost of his life. The child, on the other hand, reaches a different kind of conclusion. Her journey is not about becoming less afraid, but about redefining what fear means. She begins to understand that fear does not always disappear when something is defeated. Sometimes it changes shape, sometimes it becomes memory, and sometimes it becomes something that must be carried rather than removed. One of the most striking aspects of the ending is its emotional restraint. The film avoids overly neat resolution. It does not try to wrap everything into a clean explanation. Instead, it leaves space for uncertainty. Some questions are answered indirectly, while others are left open entirely. This choice reinforces the idea that the story is not about facts but about experience. After the climax settles, the film enters a quieter emotional phase that feels almost like an echo. The energy drops, the intensity fades, and what remains is reflection. The characters are changed, but not in simple ways. There is no sudden transformation into happiness or closure. Instead, there is a sense of survival, of having gone through something that cannot be fully explained but still leaves its mark. This is where the film's emotional strength becomes most visible. It understands that real emotional resolution is rarely dramatic. It is often quiet, incomplete, and uncertain. The film embraces this idea fully, allowing its final moments to feel more like a lingering thought than a conclusion. In terms of audience reaction, Dust Bunny quickly became a divisive but deeply discussed film. Some viewers connected strongly with its emotional depth and symbolic storytelling. They saw it as a rare example of genre cinema that prioritizes feeling over explanation. Others struggled with its ambiguity, finding the lack of clear answers frustrating. This split response is part of what gave the film its identity in public conversation. Over time, online discussions began to grow around the meaning of the monster itself. Some viewers interpreted it as a literal supernatural entity within the film's universe. Others saw it as a psychological manifestation of trauma. Some even suggested it represents grief itself, something that cannot be fought directly, only understood. The film never confirms any of these interpretations, which keeps the conversation alive long after viewing. Memes and internet culture also played a surprising role in the film's popularity. The unusual premise, a child hiring a hitman to kill a monster under her bed, became a source of humor and creativity online. People joked about childhood fears in exaggerated ways, reimagined scenes in absurd formats, and turned certain moments into viral references. But interestingly, this humor never fully overshadowed the emotional core of the film. Instead, it existed alongside it. Many viewers noted that the film's emotional sincerity made it more impactful than expected. What begins as a strange or even humorous concept gradually reveals itself as something much more serious and human. This contrast between expectation and execution is one of the reasons the film stayed in conversation longer than typical genre releases. From a box office perspective, the film did not position itself as a mainstream blockbuster. Its appeal was always more niche, targeting audiences interested in unusual storytelling, emotional fantasy, and psychological horror elements. While it did not dominate commercially, it performed steadily enough to establish itself as a memorable release within its genre space. More importantly, its cultural impact extended beyond financial performance. It became the kind of film that people recommend with hesitation and excitement at the same time. A movie that is difficult to categorize but easy to remember. Critically, the film was often described as bold, unusual, and emotionally ambitious. Even when reviewers were divided on its structure or pacing, there was a consistent acknowledgement that it was not a safe or formulaic project. It took risks in tone, structure, and storytelling approach, and those risks defined its identity. One of the most frequently discussed aspects of the film is its refusal to simplify its themes. It does not present fear as something that can be easily defeated. It does not present trauma as something that can be neatly resolved. Instead, it presents both as ongoing experiences that shape people in complicated ways. This approach gives the film a lingering quality. Even after it ends, it does not feel fully closed. Scenes replay in memory, moments take on new meaning upon reflection. The ambiguity encourages rethinking rather than final interpretation. Ultimately, Dust Bunny stands as a film about emotional survival disguised as a fantasy horror story. It uses the language of monsters, assassins, and dark imagination, but underneath all of that, it is about something much more grounded. The experience of living with fear and trying to find connection inside it. It suggests that monsters may or may not be real in the physical sense, but the emotions they represent absolutely are. And those emotions do not disappear just because they are understood. They remain transformed into something quieter but still present. In the end, what the film leaves behind is not an answer, but a feeling. A sense that fear is not always an enemy to be destroyed, but sometimes a part of life that must be faced, shared, and carried together. And in that fragile space between fear and understanding, Dust Bunny finds its lasting identity. Dust bunnies, those soft, wispy clumps of accumulated debris that silently colonize the forgotten corners of our homes, are one of the most universally recognized yet least studied phenomena of domestic life. Nearly every household in the world has encountered them, lurking beneath beds, gathering behind bookshelves, congregating along baseboards, and in the shadowy gaps under refrigerators and sofas. They appear as if by magic, seemingly overnight, transforming from invisible particles into tangible rolling tufts that skitter across hardwood floors when disturbed by a passing draft. Despite their humble and somewhat comic appearance, dust bunnies represent a surprisingly complex interplay of physics, biology, chemistry, and human behavior. They are, in their own quiet way, a remarkable natural phenomenon, one that touches on everything from household hygiene to astrophysics, from allergic disease to the evolution of consumer technology. To truly understand the dust bunny is to understand something profound about the invisible world that surrounds us, the microscopic forces that shape our environment, and the surprising connections between the tiniest particles and the grandest structures in the cosmos. The term dust bunny is itself a delightful piece of linguistic whimsy. The name evokes the image of something small, soft, and vaguely alive, a creature that hides under furniture and multiplies in the dark, much like its namesake animal. The analogy is not entirely fanciful. Dust bunnies do, in a sense, grow and reproduce. A small seed of lint or hair can accumulate more material over time, and a single large clump can be broken apart by air currents only to seed multiple smaller clusters that each go on to grow independently. The term is predominantly used in North American English, while speakers in other parts of the world may refer to the same phenomenon by different names. In some regions of the United Kingdom, they are called dust mice or dust kittens, and in other languages, entirely different metaphors are employed. The German word Wollmäuse, meaning wool mice, captures a similar sense of small, soft, animate seeming household creatures. Whatever name is given to them, the phenomenon is universal. Wherever humans live and accumulate possessions, dust bunnies will follow. At their most basic level, dust bunnies are small clumps of dust that form under furniture and in corners that are not cleaned regularly. They are made of hair, lint, flakes of dead skin, spider webs, dust, and sometimes light rubbish and debris, and they are held together by static electricity and felt like entanglement. This definition, while accurate, only scratches the surface of what dust bunnies really are. To fully appreciate them, one must delve into the science of their composition, their formation, and their behavior. The raw material of any dust bunny begins with household dust itself. House dust is a remarkably diverse mixture of organic and inorganic particles, each originating from different sources and carried to the interior of the home by a variety of mechanisms. Dead skin cells are among the most abundant components. Human beings shed approximately 30,000 to 40,000 dead skin cells every hour, and over the course of a day, an individual can lose up to 1.5 grams of skin, a number that adds up rapidly in any occupied household. These microscopic flakes, technically called squamai, drift through the air and eventually settle on surfaces throughout the home. In addition to skin cells, hair from both humans and pets contributes significantly to dust bunny composition. Human hair falls out at a rate of roughly 50 to 100 strands per day under normal conditions, and each shed hair, complete with its tiny shaft and follicle root, provides a scaffolding around which other particles can accumulate. Textile fibers are another major contributor. Every piece of clothing, bedding, carpet, curtain, and upholstery in a home continuously sheds microscopic fibers as it is used, washed, and worn. Cotton, wool, polyester, nylon, and synthetic blends all contribute fibers to the indoor air, where they eventually settle as part of the household dust matrix. Lint, the short, fine fibers that accumulate in dryer traps and on clothing, is a particularly visible form of this textile shedding, and it forms a substantial portion of most dust bunnies. The texture of lint, with its tangled and interlooping fibers, makes it especially effective at capturing and holding other particles, functioning almost like a natural filter medium. Spider webs, or more precisely the abandoned silk threads left by spiders as they move through a space, also play an important structural role in dust bunny formation. Spider silk is extraordinarily strong for its diameter and possesses a natural stickiness that helps trap other particles. Even in the absence of visible webs, microscopic silk strands can be present throughout a home, floating through the air and settling in corners where they contribute to the tangled internal structure of dust bunnies. The combination of hair, lint, and spider silk creates a three-dimensional mesh that can capture and hold even very small particles, gradually growing larger and denser over time. Beyond these organic components, household dust contains a wide variety of inorganic particles. Soil and mineral dust carried in from outside on shoes, clothing, and through open windows contributes fine silica and clay particles. Pollen grains, both from outdoor plants and indoor houseplants, are seasonally present in domestic dust. Pet dander, microscopic flecks of skin shed by cats, dogs, birds, and other animals, is a particularly potent allergen component. Burned meteorite particles, a surprising but real component of atmospheric dust, settle on all exposed surfaces. Paper fibers from books, documents, and packaging materials add to the mix. In urban environments, the dust may also contain particles from vehicle exhaust, industrial processes, and construction activity. The result is a complex, heterogeneous mixture that varies in composition from room to room, season to season, and household to household. The process by which these diverse particles come together to form distinct dust bunnies, rather than simply coating all surfaces uniformly, is governed by physical principles of considerable elegance. The key mechanism is static electricity. Many of the particles that make up household dust, particularly textile fibers and skin flakes, acquire an electrostatic charge as they move through the air and make contact with surfaces. This charge can be positive or negative, and particles with opposite charges attract each other, while particles with the same charge repel each other. As charged particles drift through the air and settle, they are drawn together by these electrostatic forces, gradually building up clusters of material. The same force that makes a balloon cling to a wall after being rubbed against hair is at work in the aggregation of dust particles. The physical architecture of a dust bunny depends also on a process analogous to felting, the way in which wool fibers interlock and bind together under pressure and agitation to form felt fabric. In a dust bunny, the loose fibers of lint, hair, and spider silk entangle and bind as more particles are added, creating a structure that is mechanically stable even in the absence of strong adhesive forces. The result is a soft, compressible object that can hold its shape reasonably well under gentle conditions, but will disperse readily when disturbed by a strong air current or physical contact. The movement of a single large particle, a long hair for instance, or a significant clump of lint, can serve as the nucleation point around which a new dust bunny begins to form. Just as a crystal grows from a seed, a dust bunny grows from an initial aggregation event, gradually accumulating more material as charged particles are attracted to the growing cluster. The locations in which dust bunnies form are not random. They preferentially accumulate in areas where air circulation is minimal and surfaces are infrequently cleaned. Under furniture, particularly beds, sofas, and heavy wardrobes that are rarely moved, is the classic habitat. Corners of rooms where two walls meet the floor are another favored location, as air currents naturally deposit particles in these low velocity zones. The gap behind kitchen appliances such as refrigerators and stoves, where heat and moisture may also be present, can accumulate particularly substantial dust bunny colonies. Baseboards and the undersides of radiators, where dust is naturally collected by convective air currents as heat rises, are also common sites. Any area that is infrequently disturbed by cleaning activity will over time develop its own community of dust bunnies. The rate at which dust bunnies form depends on a variety of factors. The number of occupants in a home is significant since more people means more skin cells, more hair, and more textile fiber being shed daily. The presence of pets dramatically accelerates dust bunny formation as animals shed fur and dander at high rates. The type of flooring plays a role as well. Carpets trap particles and prevent them from moving freely, while hard floors allow particles to drift and aggregate. Forced air heating and cooling systems can both spread dust particles throughout a home and deposit them in concentrated areas. Older homes with more dust accumulating surfaces, books, knickknacks, rough textured walls may generate more dust bunnies than newer, more minimalist spaces. Even the local climate affects dust bunny formation as dry conditions reduce the moisture that might otherwise dampen and compact loose particles. The biological inhabitants of dust bunnies are perhaps even more fascinating than their physical structure. House dust mites, tiny arachnids belonging to the species Dermatophagoides pteronosinus and Dermatophagoides farini, are present indoors wherever humans live. These microscopic creatures, invisible to the naked eye, feed primarily on the flakes of dead human and animal skin that form such a large part of household dust. A typical mattress may harbor anywhere from 100,000 to 10 million dust mites, and their waste products and shed body parts are among the most potent allergens found in the domestic environment. Dust bunnies, with their abundant food source of dead skin and their sheltered, undisturbed locations, provide ideal habitat for dust mite populations. Positive tests for dust mite allergies are extremely common among people with asthma. The proteins in dust mite feces and body fragments trigger immune responses in sensitive individuals, causing symptoms ranging from sneezing and runny nose to severe asthma attacks. The relationship between dust mites and allergic disease is one of the most important and well-studied connections in the field of environmental health. Dust bunnies, as concentrated reservoirs of dust mite habitat, play a significant role in the indoor allergen burden of homes. This makes the control of dust bunnies not merely an aesthetic concern but a genuine public health issue, particularly for households with asthmatic or allergic members. Beyond dust mites, dust bunnies can also harbor other microscopic organisms. Fungal spores from mold and mildew species can accumulate in dust, and the relatively undisturbed conditions within a dust bunny may allow fungal growth under favorable moisture conditions. Bacteria, while not typically present in high concentrations in normal household dust, can be found in dust bunnies, particularly in areas near kitchens or bathrooms where organic material is more abundant. Insect eggs and larval stages of various household pests may also be present in dust bunny communities. The dust bunny is, in a sense, a microcosm, a small ecosystem with its own inhabitants, its own food chains, and its own dynamics. The relationship between dust bunnies and human health extends beyond allergies and asthma. Fine particulate matter in household dust can affect respiratory health even in non-allergic individuals. Long-term inhalation of fine dust particles has been associated with chronic respiratory inflammation and, in cases involving specific contaminants such as asbestos fibers or lead particles from old paint, with serious diseases including asbestosis and lead poisoning. In older homes built before the 1980s, dust bunnies may contain fragments of lead-based paint or asbestos insulation, making their removal a matter requiring particular care. Regular cleaning to prevent the accumulation of large dust deposits is therefore important not only for comfort and aesthetics but for the long-term health of household occupants. Dust bunnies also have significant implications for electronic devices and other technological equipment. They can obstruct airflow through heat sinks, raising temperatures significantly and therefore shortening the life of electronic components. The interior of a desktop computer, for instance, can accumulate substantial quantities of dust bunnies over time if not cleaned regularly. As dust clogs the fans, heat sinks, and vents of computers, the resulting increase in operating temperature accelerates the degradation of electronic components, reduces processing performance, and can ultimately cause catastrophic hardware failure. The same principle applies to other household electronics including televisions, gaming consoles, and home theater equipment. Air conditioners and HVAC systems are particularly vulnerable as dust bunny accumulation in filters and coils can dramatically reduce their efficiency and increase energy consumption. Regular cleaning of electronic devices is therefore not merely a matter of aesthetics but a practical necessity for maintaining their performance and longevity. The challenge of managing dust bunnies has driven significant innovation in household cleaning technology. Traditional approaches involve manual sweeping, vacuuming, and mopping, activities that are effective when performed regularly but require significant time and effort, particularly in the challenging under furniture spaces where dust bunnies preferentially accumulate. The vacuum cleaner, invented in various forms beginning in the late 19th century, remains the primary tool for dust bunny control in most households. Modern vacuum cleaners are equipped with high efficiency filters that can capture even very fine particles, preventing them from being redistributed into the air during cleaning. HEPA high efficiency particulate air filters, capable of capturing 99.97% of particles as small as 0.3 micrometers, have become increasingly standard in quality vacuum cleaners and represent a significant advance in the ability to reduce indoor dust levels. Electrostatic dusting tools, which use the same static charge principles that cause dust particles to aggregate, have also proven effective for dust bunny control. Synthetic fiber dusters with electrostatic properties attract and hold dust particles rather than merely redistributing them. Microfiber cloths and mops, which use microscopic fiber structures to physically trap particles, have similarly become important tools in modern dust management. The development of robotic vacuum cleaners in the early 21st century represented another significant advance, offering the possibility of automated, continuous cleaning that could prevent the accumulation of dust bunnies without requiring manual effort. An American trademark for dust bunny was registered in 2006 for the dust bunny cleaner, a robotic ball with an electrostatic sleeve that rolls around under furniture to collect dust bunnies and other material. This innovative approach recognized that the under furniture spaces where dust bunnies most frequently accumulate are precisely the areas most difficult to reach with conventional cleaning equipment. The ball's shape and the use of electrostatic attraction rather than suction made it particularly well suited for collecting the fluffy, lightweight clumps that characterize mature dust bunnies. While this specific product may have had limited commercial success, it exemplified a broader trend of technological innovation aimed specifically at the dust bunny problem. More recently, robotic vacuum cleaners such as the Roomba and its competitors have become capable of operating under furniture in the spaces where dust bunnies accumulate, offering a continuous automated approach to dust bunny prevention. These devices use sensors and mapping algorithms to navigate through rooms, cleaning floors on a regular schedule without human intervention. When used consistently, they can dramatically reduce dust bunny accumulation by removing the particles that would otherwise aggregate into clumps. The development of these technologies reflects a broader social recognition of the burden that household dust management places on individuals and families, and the value of reducing that burden through automation. The scientific study of dust bunnies extends well beyond the domestic realm. Researchers studying the behavior of granular materials and complex fluids have found dust bunny formation to be a useful model system for understanding fundamental physical processes. The aggregation of particles under electrostatic forces, the role of fiber entanglement in creating stable structures, and the dynamics of particle clusters in flowing air are all topics of active scientific inquiry with implications far beyond household cleaning. Understanding how dust bunnies form and behave can contribute to improved air filtration technology, better understanding of industrial dust hazards, and insights into the physics of granular materials used in pharmaceuticals, agriculture, and manufacturing. Dust bunnies have also become an important analogy in astrophysics and planetary science. Dust bunnies have been used as an analogy for the accretion of cosmic matter in planetoids, the process by which tiny dust particles in interstellar space and protoplanetary disks come together to form progressively larger objects, ultimately building planets and other planetary bodies, shares fundamental physical similarities with the formation of household dust bunnies. In both cases, small particles aggregate through electrostatic and mechanical forces, building up complex three-dimensional structures from initially dispersed components. Scientists studying planet formation have found the dust bunny model useful because it illustrates how very small forces acting on many particles over long periods of time can produce large-scale structures. The same principles that govern the aggregation of lint and hair in the corner of a bedroom may, in a very real sense, govern the aggregation of interstellar dust grains in the disk around a young star. Research published in the journal IEEE Transactions on Plasma Science has explicitly explored the formation of cosmic dust bunnies, describing experiments in which charged dust particles in laboratory plasma environments form aggregates with properties similar to those of interstellar dust grains. This research has important implications for understanding the early stages of planet formation, the structure of cometary material, and the behavior of dust in various astrophysical environments. The discovery that the humble household dust bunny shares structural and formation principles with objects of cosmic significance is a striking example of how everyday phenomena can illuminate fundamental scientific questions. In the popular culture of the English-speaking world, dust bunnies have achieved a certain iconic status. The image of a dust bunny rolling across a dirty floor has become a shorthand symbol for domestic neglect, used in humorous context to comment on the challenges of household maintenance. In animated films and children's media, dust bunnies have occasionally been anthropomorphized as characters, small, whimsical beings that inhabit the forgotten spaces of the home. This personification of dust bunnies reflects something genuine about the way people perceive them. There is a quality of life, of vaguely animate presence, in the way they bob and skitter in air currents, seemingly alive even as they are demonstrably inert. In the video game The Sims 4, dust bunnies are featured in the Bust the Dust expansion kit, where animate dust bunnies pop up in houses that are not frequently vacuumed and Sims can interact with them. This game mechanic transforms the dust bunny from a passive accumulation into an active agent within the domestic environment, one that demands attention and response from the player. The fact that a major video game franchise has incorporated dust bunnies as a gameplay element speaks to the extent to which these humble clumps of debris have become embedded in popular consciousness as symbols of domestic life. The cultural resonance of dust bunnies extends into language and metaphor. The term is used in various figurative senses to describe things that lurk in hidden corners, accumulate unnoticed over time, or emerge unexpectedly from neglected spaces. Ideas, memories, and unresolved problems are sometimes described as dust bunnies when they have been gathering in the mental equivalent of under furniture spaces, pushed aside and ignored until they can no longer be overlooked. This metaphorical use of the term points to the way in which dust bunnies, as physical objects, embody certain qualities that resonate with human experience: gradual accumulation, hidden persistence, the revelation of neglect. The practice of cleaning, removing dust bunnies, and maintaining household hygiene is itself a subject of considerable cultural and psychological interest. For many people, cleaning is a source of stress and obligation, a task that must be performed regularly but is never entirely completed. For others, cleaning is a source of satisfaction and even pleasure, an activity that provides a sense of control over the environment and a visible demonstration of care and order. The relationship between cleanliness, dust, and psychological well-being has been the subject of various studies in environmental psychology and public health. In general, research suggests that cluttered, dusty environments are associated with higher levels of stress and lower levels of reported well-being, while clean, organized environments are associated with improved mood and reduced anxiety. The regular removal of dust bunnies seen through this lens is not merely a hygienic practice but a form of environmental self-care. Different cultural traditions place widely varying emphasis on cleanliness and the removal of dust. In some cultures, a very high standard of household cleanliness is expected and maintained, with regular intensive cleaning as a social and moral norm. In others, the presence of some dust and disorder is accepted as a natural feature of a lived-in, comfortable home. These cultural differences affect not only individual cleaning behavior but also the design of homes, the development of cleaning products, and the social judgments people make about each other's domestic spaces. The dust bunny, as an indicator of cleaning frequency and thoroughness, can thus become a social symbol as well as a hygienic concern. The economic dimension of dust bunny control are also considerable. The household cleaning products industry is a multi-billion-dollar sector that includes vacuum cleaners, dusters, mops, filters, and a wide range of chemical cleaning agents. A significant portion of this industry's value proposition rests on the desire of consumers to control indoor dust and prevent the accumulation of dust bunnies. The marketing of cleaning products frequently appeals to health concerns, dust mite allergies, respiratory health, the well being of children, as well as to aesthetic desires for a clean, orderly home. The development and marketing of robotic vacuum cleaners represents one of the most significant recent investments in dust bunny control technology, with major technology companies competing to produce the most effective, autonomous, and convenient devices for maintaining dust-free floors. Professional cleaning services represent another significant economic sector related to dust bunny control. In households where time constraints prevent regular cleaning or where the level of accumulated dust has reached the point where specialized equipment is needed, professional cleaners provide a service that includes the removal of deep-seated dust deposits. The market for professional cleaning services has grown substantially in recent decades, particularly in urban areas with high proportions of dual-income households where time for domestic tasks is limited. Air quality management represents yet another economic and practical dimension of the dust bunny problem. Indoor air quality has become a significant concern in modern buildings, particularly as energy efficient construction has reduced natural ventilation and increased the concentration of airborne pollutants. Air purifiers equipped with HEPA filters are marketed specifically for their ability to remove the fine particles that contribute to dust bunny formation and that can irritate the respiratory systems of occupants. The regular replacement of HVAC filters, which can themselves become clogged with accumulated dust bunnies, is an important maintenance task in homes and commercial buildings. The interaction between air filtration systems and dust bunny formation creates a feedback loop. Effective air filtration removes the particles that would otherwise aggregate into dust bunnies, while dust bunny accumulation can reduce the effectiveness of filtration systems. The scientific study of indoor dust and dust bunny formation has produced a substantial body of research with direct practical implications. Studies of the composition of indoor dust across different types of homes and environments have revealed the remarkable diversity of materials present. Research on the health effects of specific dust components, from dust mite allergens to lead particles in old paint dust, has informed regulatory standards and public health guidance. Investigations of the physical and chemical factors that govern dust particle aggregation have contributed to improved understanding of both natural and industrial dust phenomena. One particularly active area of research concerns the presence of microplastics in household dust. As synthetic materials have become ubiquitous in modern homes, microscopic plastic fibers shed from synthetic textiles, floor coverings, and other products have become an increasingly significant component of household dust. These microplastic particles can be inhaled and may have health effects that are still being studied. Dust bunnies in contemporary homes may contain significant concentrations of microplastic fibers, making their regular removal even more important from a health perspective. The presence of microplastics in household dust is a relatively recent discovery, and its implications for human health are an active subject of research. The connection between dust bunnies and indoor air quality is mediated by a process of resuspension. Settled dust, including the material in dust bunnies, is not permanently removed from the indoor air. Activities such as walking, vacuuming without adequate filtration, and air currents from ventilation systems can lift settled particles back into suspension, where they can be inhaled. This resuspension effect means that the accumulation of dust bunnies represents a continuing reservoir of potentially harmful particles that can repeatedly enter the breathable air. Managing dust bunnies effectively, therefore, requires not only their removal but also prevention of resuspension during the cleaning process, which is why the quality of vacuum cleaner filters and the use of wet cleaning methods that bind particles before they can be resuspended matters so much. The relationship between dust bunny accumulation and the design of living spaces is an important practical consideration that often goes unrecognized. Furniture arrangements that leave large areas under beds, sofas, and bookshelves inaccessible to vacuum cleaners create environments where dust bunnies can accumulate unimpeded for months or years. Low furniture with minimal underclearance traps dust in spaces that cannot be easily reached. Rough textured floor surfaces such as stone and unfinished wood can trap and hold particles more effectively than smooth surfaces, promoting local dust accumulation. Interior designers and furniture manufacturers have increasingly recognized these issues, and there is growing interest in designs that minimize hidden under furniture spaces and facilitate easier cleaning. The choice of flooring material has a significant impact on dust bunny formation and control. Carpets and rugs, while comfortable and acoustically beneficial, are notorious reservoirs of dust, allergens, and dust mites. The deep pile of a carpet can trap enormous quantities of material that is not easily removed by surface vacuuming. Research has shown that regular vacuuming can significantly reduce the surface accessible fraction of carpet dust, but material embedded deep in the pile may persist for much longer periods. Hard flooring materials such as hardwood, tile, and polished concrete are generally easier to keep dust free since particles remain on the surface where they can be swept or mopped away. However, hard floors also allow dust to move more freely, which can contribute to dust bunny formation in corners and under furniture if the space is not cleaned regularly. The prevention of dust bunny formation is ultimately a matter of regular and thorough cleaning, combined with strategies to reduce the amount of dust generating material in the home. Grooming pets regularly to reduce shedding, using allergen proof covers on mattresses and pillows to limit the dispersal of skin cells and dust mite material, maintaining adequate ventilation to dilute indoor air pollutants, and replacing furnishings that shed excessive lint or fibers are all approaches that can reduce the rate of dust bunny formation. Choosing vacuum cleaners with high quality filtration systems ensures that cleaning removes particles from the indoor environment rather than simply redistributing them. Establishing regular cleaning routines that include the under furniture spaces where dust bunnies accumulate is perhaps the most important single step in preventing their buildup. Seasonal cleaning patterns, such as the tradition of spring cleaning in many cultures, reflect an awareness of the way dust accumulates over time and the periodic need for more thorough cleaning than regular maintenance provides. The spring cleaning tradition, which involves a comprehensive deep cleaning of the entire home, typically includes the removal of accumulated dust from all surfaces, including those under and behind furniture. In other words, the elimination of the dust bunny populations that have grown through the winter months. This tradition, practiced in various forms across many cultures worldwide, represents a cultural recognition of the inevitable tendency of homes to accumulate dust over time and the need for periodic intensive effort to restore them to cleanliness. The management of dust in industrial and occupational settings has much in common with household dust bunny control, but operates at a much larger scale and with greater urgency. Certain industrial dusts are acutely hazardous. Coal dust, silica dust, asbestos fibers, and metal dusts such as beryllium can cause severe and potentially fatal lung diseases. The control of industrial dust is regulated by occupational health and safety authorities in most countries, with strict limits on the concentration of hazardous dust in workplace air. Dust collection systems, personal protective equipment, and engineering controls such as enclosures and wet methods are required in workplaces where hazardous dust is generated. The principles underlying industrial dust control, preventing the generation of fine particles, capturing them at source, and using effective filtration to remove them from the air, are the same principles that apply to domestic dust bunny management, scaled up and made more rigorous to address more serious hazards. Thinking about dust bunnies in a broader ecological context reveals their role as part of the larger cycle of matter in the terrestrial environment. The particles that make up dust bunnies are themselves derived from the breakdown of larger materials. Clothing and textiles wear down to produce lint, skin naturally sheds its outer layer, spiders produce silk and abandoned webs, and the dust bunnies themselves will eventually be decomposed back into fine particles that may be swept outdoors, pass through filters, or settle into the broader soil environment. The organic components of dust bunnies are biodegradable and will eventually be broken down by microorganisms into simpler compounds. Even the inorganic mineral components will be gradually incorporated back into the soil. In this sense, dust bunnies are participants in the ongoing cycling of matter through the domestic and natural environment, a point of accumulation in a larger flow of material from multiple sources through the household and back into the world. The intersection of dust bunny science with emerging areas of research such as the microbiome and environmental genomics is opening new perspectives on these familiar objects. Studies using high throughput DNA sequencing have revealed that household dust, and by extension dust bunnies, contains a remarkable diversity of microbial genetic material representing hundreds or thousands of species of bacteria, fungi, and other organisms. This microbial diversity reflects sources from which dust originates: outdoor soil, human and animal skin, food, plants, and many others. The composition of the household dust microbiome varies with factors such as the geographic location of the home, the presence of pets, the number and activities of occupants, and the cleaning practices of the household. Research in this area is revealing how the microbial environment of the home, including the microorganisms harbored in dust bunnies, may influence the immune development of children, the prevalence of allergic disease, and even aspects of human health and cognition. The story of the dust bunny is, in the end, a story about the invisible, about the countless tiny processes and particles that collectively produce the visible world around us. In a single dust bunny, one can find the traces of a household's daily life: the hair of its occupants and their pets, the fibers of their clothing and bedding, the flakes of their skin, the remnants of their activities. The dust bunny is a kind of archive, a record in miniature of the lives lived in a space. Its formation reflects fundamental physical laws that govern the behavior of particles from the scale of atoms to the scale of planets. Its inhabitants, dust mites, fungi, bacteria, constitute a miniature ecosystem with its own complexity and its own importance for human health. Its control has driven technological innovation and shaped the design of our homes, our cleaning products, and our daily routines. Understanding dust bunnies more fully means recognizing them not merely as nuisances to be swept away, but as genuinely interesting objects that connect us to deep currents of science, culture, and human experience. The physicist studying particle aggregation, the allergist treating asthma patients, the engineer designing better air filters, the astrophysicist modeling planetary formation, and the parent trying to create a healthy home environment for their children are all in different ways grappling with the same phenomenon. The dust bunny sits at the intersection of all these concerns, a small, soft, mundane object that turns out, on closer examination, to be a window into an astonishingly rich and interconnected world. In every home, in every corner, and beneath every piece of furniture, the process of dust bunny formation is quietly underway. Skin cells drift from bodies, fibers shed from textiles, hairs fall and curl in still air, electrostatic forces draw particles together, and the invisible becomes tangible. The dust bunny grows, accumulates, drifts in a passing draft, and finally comes to rest again in some new corner where the process will begin afresh. It is a process as old as human habitation, as universal as the shedding of skin, as inevitable as the passage of time, and it is, in its quiet, unassuming way, one of the most instructive phenomena that the domestic world has to offer. A reminder that even the most overlooked corners of our lives contain depth and complexity for those willing to look. The history of human attitudes toward dust is itself a rich and layered subject. Ancient civilizations were well aware of dust as a feature of their environments, and many developed practical approaches to its management long before the advent of modern cleaning technology. In ancient Egypt, where the desert environment produced enormous quantities of wind-borne dust, the maintenance of clean interiors was a significant domestic challenge. Household servants were tasked with regular sweeping and wiping of surfaces, and the floors of wealthier homes were often covered with smooth plaster or stone that could be easily cleaned. In ancient Rome, domestic slaves performed regular cleaning duties that included the sweeping of floors and the dusting of surfaces, and the expectation of a well-maintained household was tied to social status and respectability. These ancient cleaning practices address the same fundamental problem that confronts homeowners today: the inevitable accumulation of dust from the environment and from the activities of the household's occupants. The invention and refinement of cleaning tools has been a continuous process throughout human history. Early brooms and brushes made from natural plant fibers represent significant technological advances over bare hand cleaning, providing a means of gathering and removing loose particles from floor surfaces. Mops made from cloth or plant fiber allowed wet cleaning of floors, binding particles and preventing their resuspension into the air. Feather dusters made from the large wing and tail feathers of birds such as ostriches became popular in Europe and North America in the 18th and 19th centuries and remain in use today for dusting delicate surfaces and hard to reach areas. While not particularly effective at removing all dust from surfaces, feather dusters are useful for disturbing and gathering loose material, and their soft texture makes them gentle on fragile objects. The Industrial Revolution brought new challenges and opportunities in the area of dust management. On one hand, the growth of factories and industrial processes generated enormous quantities of industrial dust that posed serious health hazards to workers and residents of industrial areas. On the other hand, industrialization created the conditions for the development of new cleaning technologies. The carpet sweeper, a mechanical device using rotating brushes to gather dust and debris from carpets, was invented in the mid 19th century and represented a significant advance over manual sweeping. The vacuum cleaner, initially large, heavy, and expensive, was developed in the early 20th century and gradually evolved into the compact, powerful devices available today. The availability of cheap electric motors made it possible to mass produce vacuum cleaners, and by the mid 20th century, they had become standard household items in most industrialized countries. The transition from broom and dustpan to vacuum cleaner represented more than a technological change. It fundamentally altered the relationship between households and dust. Vacuuming can remove dust not only from floor surfaces but from the interiors of carpets, upholstery, and other soft furnishings that cannot be effectively cleaned by sweeping alone. The containment of collected dust within a vacuum cleaner bag or canister prevents it from being redistributed into the air during cleaning. Modern vacuum cleaners with HEPA filtration can capture even the finest particles that cause allergic reactions, making them genuinely effective tools for improving indoor air quality rather than merely redistributing dust from one location to another. The development of microfiber technology in the late 20th century added another important tool to the dust management repertoire. Microfiber cloths and mops consist of fibers that are many times finer than human hair, typically around one-tenth the diameter of a silk thread, and their microscopic fiber structure allows them to physically trap and hold particles rather than merely pushing them around. Microfiber materials can remove dust, bacteria, and other particles from surfaces using only water, without the need for chemical cleaning agents, and they are significantly more effective at capturing fine particles than conventional cotton cloths. The widespread adoption of microfiber cleaning products has been one of the most significant practical advances in domestic dust control in recent decades. The psychological dimension of dust and cleaning deserves more extended treatment. Research in environmental psychology has explored the ways in which the cleanliness and orderliness of a living environment affect the mood, stress levels, and cognitive functioning of its occupants. Studies have found that individuals living in cluttered, disorganized environments report higher levels of the stress hormone cortisol and greater difficulty concentrating than those in cleaner, more organized spaces. The presence of visible dirt and dust, including dust bunnies, can contribute to a sense of being overwhelmed or out of control, particularly for individuals who are already experiencing high levels of stress. Conversely, the act of cleaning, sweeping, vacuuming, and removing dust bunnies can be experienced as restorative, providing a sense of agency and accomplishment in the face of environmental disorder. There is also a social dimension to the visibility of dust in one's home. In many cultures, the cleanliness of a household is seen as reflecting on the character and industriousness of its occupants. Unexpected visitors who discover dust bunnies under the furniture may make negative judgments about the homeowner, and the fear of such judgments can motivate intensive cleaning before social events. This social pressure around household cleanliness falls disproportionately on women in many cultures, where the maintenance of the domestic environment has historically been seen as a female responsibility. Feminist scholars have pointed to the burden of domestic cleaning as one dimension of the broader unequal distribution of unpaid labor between men and women. and the time and effort required for dust management has been a specific focus of this critique. The existence of affordable robotic cleaning devices and professional cleaning services has partially addressed this burden for those who can afford them, but the fundamental social expectation of a clean home continues to generate significant labor and anxiety for many households. The connection between dust bunnies and the broader question of indoor air pollution is increasingly recognized in public health context. The World Health Organization has identified indoor air pollution as a significant global health concern, responsible for millions of premature deaths annually and contributing to respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. While much of this burden falls on households in low income countries where biomass fuels are burned for cooking and heating, indoor air quality is also a significant concern in high income countries, particularly in energy efficient modern buildings with limited natural ventilation. Household dust, including the particles that form dust bunnies, contributes to indoor particulate matter levels that can exceed outdoor air quality standards during activities such as cooking, vacuuming, or simply walking on carpeted floors. The role of humidity in dust bunny formation and control is another aspect that is often overlooked. Household dust particles absorb moisture from the air, and at higher humidity levels, dust tends to be heavier, damp, and more likely to adhere to surfaces rather than remaining airborne. This can reduce the rate at which dust becomes airborne and inhaled, but it also creates conditions more favorable for the growth of dust mites and mold, both of which thrive in humid environments. At lower humidity levels, dust particles are drier and lighter, more readily suspended in air, and more likely to travel and aggregate into dust bunnies under furniture. Maintaining indoor humidity levels in the range of 30 to 50% is generally recommended for both comfort and health, as this range inhibits the growth of dust mites and mold while also reducing the levels of airborne dry particles. The chemistry of household dust bunnies is more complex than their fluffy, inert appearance might suggest. Various chemical compounds accumulate in household dust over time, including pesticide residues tracked in on shoes, phthalate plasticizers shed from plastic materials, flame retardants from furniture and electronics, and a wide range of other synthetic chemicals used in products throughout the home. These chemicals can accumulate in dust and in the dust bunnies that represent concentrated deposits of dust. Young children who spend significant time on the floor and have hand-to-mouth behaviors may be exposed to these chemical contaminants through contact with dust bunnies, and research has found elevated levels of various synthetic chemicals in the blood and urine of young children living in homes with high dust chemical loads. The management of household dust as a route of exposure to chemical contaminants has become an important focus of environmental health research. The ecological connections between household dust bunnies and the outdoor environment are more significant than they might initially appear. Much of the inorganic content of household dust enters homes from the outside, tracked in on shoes and clothing, or drifting in through open windows and doors. Soil particles, pollen, and atmospheric pollution can all be found in household dust bunnies. Conversely, dust that is swept or vacuumed from homes eventually finds its way back to the outdoor environment, carrying with it the mixture of organic and inorganic material that accumulated indoors. In areas with sandy or silty soils, wind erosion can contribute substantial quantities of mineral dust to the indoor environment, and homes in these regions may accumulate dust bunnies more rapidly than those in areas with more cohesive soil. Agricultural activities such as plowing and harvesting can generate large amounts of soil dust that enters nearby homes, and urban construction activity is a significant source of fine mineral particles that penetrate indoor spaces. The physics of dust bunny rolling and motion when disturbed by air currents provides another area of interesting scientific complexity. A mature dust bunny, being a loosely cohesive aggregation of low-density material, is extremely sensitive to air movement. The slightest draft from an opening door, a passing person, or an air vent can set a dust bunny in motion across a smooth floor surface, a characteristic behavior that has become one of the defining images of domestic neglect in popular culture. The rolling motion of a disturbed dust bunny is driven by a combination of aerodynamic lift and drag forces acting on the irregular, fluffy surface of the aggregation. The way a dust bunny responds to air currents can actually provide qualitative information about the speed and direction of air movement in a room, making these seemingly inert objects functional as informal airflow indicators. The breakup of a dust bunny under the influence of air or physical disturbance also follows interesting physical principles. A large, well established dust bunny has a certain structural integrity deriving from the entanglement of its fiber components and the electrostatic cohesion of its constituent particles. However, this integrity is limited. A sufficiently strong air current or physical contact during cleaning will cause the dust bunny to break apart into smaller pieces. These smaller pieces may then drift separately until they accumulate in new locations and begin growing into new dust bunnies in a process that somewhat resembles biological reproduction. The threshold air velocity required to break apart a dust bunny depends on its size, density, and the degree to which its components are entangled. Larger, more tightly packed dust bunnies require stronger disturbances to break apart than smaller, more loosely aggregated ones. The role of pets in dust bunny formation is significant enough to deserve dedicated consideration. Dogs and cats, being the most common household pets in many countries, shed hair and dander at rates that far exceed those of their human companions. A single large dog may shed more hair in a day than all the human occupants of a household combined, and cat fur in particular, being fine and lightweight, becomes airborne readily and can be found in every corner of a home where cats live. Pet hair is especially effective as a structural element of dust bunnies because of its length, flexibility, and tendency to curl and tangle. The hooks and scales on many types of pet fur allow them to interlock with other fur strands and with lint fibers, creating a particularly robust internal structure in pet-associated dust bunnies. Homes with multiple pets, particularly those that are not groomed regularly, can develop remarkably large and well-established dust bunny populations in a very short time. The science of removing pet-associated dust bunnies presents particular challenges. The fine light fibers of cat fur tend to become airborne easily when disturbed, making their removal by sweeping particularly inefficient. The static charge that cat and dog fur readily acquires makes these particles adhere to surfaces more tenaciously than human hair or textile lint. Specialized vacuum cleaner attachments designed for pet hair, which use rotating brush heads to disengage fur from carpet fibers, and air purifiers with HEPA filters that can capture the fine dander particles that cause allergic reactions, have become important tools in the management of pet-associated dust bunnies. For individuals with pet allergies, the regular and thorough removal of pet-associated dust bunnies can be an important part of allergen management. Examining dust bunnies from the perspective of the history of science and technology reveals the evolution of human understanding of dust and its effects. For much of human history, the exact nature of household dust was not well understood, and many popular beliefs about it were inaccurate. The discovery of dust mites as a major component of household dust and as a source of potent allergens occurred relatively recently, in the mid-20th century. The identification of dead skin cells as a major component of household dust came with advances in microscopy. The recognition that household dust contains significant concentrations of synthetic chemicals from consumer products has emerged over the past few decades. Each of these discoveries has changed the way people think about the dust bunnies under their furniture, transforming them from mere nuisances into objects of genuine scientific interest with important implications for health. The future of dust bunny management is likely to involve increasingly sophisticated technology and increasingly detailed scientific understanding. Advances in robotics and artificial intelligence are making robotic vacuum cleaners more capable, more autonomous, and better able to navigate the complex geometries of real homes. The development of smart homes with networked sensors and automated systems may eventually allow for real-time monitoring of dust levels in different rooms and automated cleaning responses when levels exceed acceptable thresholds. Material science advances may produce surfaces and fabrics that resist dust accumulation more effectively than current materials, reducing the rate at which dust bunnies form. Better understanding of the health effects of specific dust components may lead to more targeted approaches to dust management, focusing effort and resources on the removal of the most harmful particles. At the same time, growing awareness of the environmental costs of cleaning products and appliances, including the energy consumption of vacuum cleaners, the chemical inputs of cleaning products, and the environmental impacts of robotic vacuum cleaner manufacturing and disposal, is driving interest in more sustainable approaches to dust management. Low energy cleaning devices, biodegradable cleaning products, and design approaches that reduce the generation of dust forming materials are all areas of active development. The challenge of managing dust bunnies in a sustainable way reflects a broader challenge of reconciling the desire for a clean and healthy home environment with the environmental costs of achieving it. The dust bunny, in all its microscopic complexity and macroscopic familiarity, stands as a remarkable testament to the richness hidden in everyday phenomena. It is a physical object formed by fundamental forces, an ecosystem harboring biological communities, a health concern with implications for millions, a technological challenge driving innovation, a cultural symbol with resonance across many languages and traditions, and an analogy that illuminates processes occurring on the grandest scales in the universe. To look at a dust bunny with full attention is to see in miniature a reflection of the interconnected world in which we live, a world in which the smallest particles, the most fundamental forces, and the most everyday human activities are all part of a single, continuous, endlessly fascinating whole. The next time a dust bunny skitters across the floor on a draft from an opening door, consider what it represents: the accumulated skin of the home's occupants, the shed fur of their pets, the worn fibers of their clothing and bedding, all gathered together by the invisible forces of static electricity into a structure that mimics in miniature the processes by which planets are built from cosmic dust. Consider the mites that may inhabit it, living out their microscopic lives in a world invisible to the naked eye. Consider the health implications of the particles that compose it, the cleaning technologies developed to remove it, the cultural attitudes that surround it. Consider that in this small, soft, seemingly trivial object, the full complexity of the modern world is quietly, persistently, and fascinatingly present. The dust bunny is, in the end, not merely a sign of a floor that needs cleaning. It is an invitation to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, and to recognize that even the most overlooked corners of our lives are full of depth, connection, and wonder. Dust bunny management has also intersected with the evolution of interior design philosophy over the decades. Mid-century modern design, with its preference for low-profile furniture and open floor plans, inadvertently created environments that could be challenging for dust bunny control. Long, low sofas with minimal clearance above the floor created difficult to reach spaces where dust could accumulate undisturbed for months. The Scandinavian minimalist tradition, which emphasizes clean surfaces, restricted ornamentation, and easy to clean materials, can be partly understood as a design philosophy that takes dust management seriously, privileging surfaces and arrangements that facilitate maintenance. The trend toward raised furniture on legs, beds, sofas, and storage units that allow a vacuum cleaner to pass underneath reflects a pragmatic recognition of the dust bunny problem and an architectural response to it. Conversely, the trend toward built-in furniture with storage units that extend to the floor without any gap eliminates the under furniture spaces where dust bunnies accumulate, but creates other challenges. The dust that would otherwise collect underneath the furniture must now go somewhere else, and built-in units that seal against the floor can themselves trap dust and become difficult to clean thoroughly. The relationship between furniture design and dust bunny management is a genuinely practical consideration that good interior designers take into account, even if it is rarely explicitly discussed in design publications. The materials used in the construction of furniture, flooring, and textiles also affect the composition and behavior of the dust bunnies that form in their vicinity. Natural wood floors, with their grain and texture, can trap fine particles in small surface irregularities, while polished synthetic floors provide a smoother surface from which particles are more readily swept. Wool carpets, which are naturally more static resistant than synthetic carpets, may generate less electrostatically charged dust than nylon or polyester carpeting. Natural fiber upholstery tends to shed different types of lint than synthetic upholstery, with implications for the texture and composition of nearby dust bunnies. The comprehensive understanding of dust bunny formation therefore requires knowledge not just of physics and biology but also of materials science and interior design. The monitoring and measurement of household dust levels has become increasingly sophisticated in recent years. Traditional methods relied on visual inspection, the presence of visible dust deposits and dust bunnies being the primary indicator, or on simple gravimetric methods in which a known surface area was wiped and the collected material weighed. Modern approaches can use optical particle counters to measure the concentration of airborne particles of different sizes in real time, providing a detailed picture of indoor air quality that changes minute by minute as occupants move through the space and carry out various activities. Some sophisticated air quality monitoring systems now track PM 2.5, particles smaller than 2, 5 micrometers and PM10, particles smaller than 10 micrometers, concentrations continuously, alerting occupants when levels exceed recommended thresholds, and documenting the effects of cleaning activities on indoor air quality. Research using such monitoring systems has revealed some counterintuitive results about cleaning activities. Vacuuming, for instance, can temporarily increase airborne particle concentrations in a room as the mechanical action of the vacuum cleaner disturbs settled dust and the exhaust air from poorly filtered vacuum cleaners redistributes fine particles into the air. The use of vacuum cleaners with inadequate filtration can thus make indoor air quality temporarily worse during the cleaning process, even as it removes bulk dust deposits from floor surfaces. This research has contributed to the widespread adoption of HEPA-filtered vacuum cleaners and has highlighted the importance of considering the air quality implications of cleaning activities, not just their surface cleaning effectiveness. The interaction between smoking and dust bunny formation adds another dimension to the health implications of these domestic accumulations. In homes where tobacco smoking occurs, the particles and chemical compounds in tobacco smoke become part of the household dust, including the dust bunnies that form under furniture. Third-hand smoke, the residual contamination from tobacco smoke that settles on surfaces and becomes embedded in dust, can persist in a home for months or years after smoking has ceased, and children who play on floors and contact dust are exposed to these contaminants through ingestion and skin contact. The removal of smoking contaminated dust bunnies is an important but often overlooked component of efforts to reduce third-hand smoke exposure, particularly in homes with young children. The use of chemical dust control agents in industrial and agricultural settings provides an interesting contrast to domestic dust management approaches. In environments such as coal mines, grain elevators, and construction sites, water misting, chemical suppressants, and local exhaust ventilation systems are used to control dust concentrations and prevent the formation of explosive or hazardous dust clouds. These industrial approaches operate on the same fundamental principles as domestic dust management, reducing the concentration of airborne particles, preventing their aggregation into potentially harmful accumulations, but at a scale and with a level of engineering rigor that reflects the severity of the hazards involved. The lessons learned in industrial dust control have informed domestic dust management recommendations, just as domestic observations about dust behavior have contributed to the broader scientific understanding of particulate matter dynamics. The question of when a house is too dusty and what constitutes an acceptable level of dust bunny accumulation is one that lacks a definitive scientific answer. Health standards for household dust exposure are less well developed than those for industrial and outdoor air quality, reflecting both the difficulty of monitoring household environments and the heterogeneity of domestic dust composition. General recommendations from health authorities tend to emphasize regular cleaning, particularly vacuuming with high quality filters, as the primary strategy for maintaining acceptable dust levels. For individuals with diagnosed dust mite allergies or asthma, more intensive recommendations apply, including the use of allergen-proof mattress and pillow covers, the removal of carpets and heavy drapes where possible, and regular washing of bedding at high temperatures. The development of more specific evidence-based guidance for household dust management remains an important goal for environmental health research. The global dimension of household dust and dust bunny formation points to the way in which local domestic environments are connected to large-scale environmental processes. Saharan dust, carried across the Atlantic Ocean by prevailing winds has been detected in indoor dust samples from homes in the Caribbean and North America. Mineral dust from arid regions of Asia contributes to household dust levels in Japan and Korea. Radioactive fallout from nuclear tests conducted during the mid 20th century left detectable isotopic signatures in household dust samples collected around the world. The dust under the furniture in any home is thus, in a subtle but real way, a product not just of the activities within that home but of processes occurring thousands of kilometers away. A reminder that even the most private and domestic of environments is connected to the wider world. The future study of dust bunnies holds promise for advances across multiple scientific and practical domains. More detailed molecular characterization of household dust composition using the tools of environmental genomics and analytical chemistry will continue to reveal new components with health implications and new connection to broader environmental processes. Advances in nanotechnology may produce new materials with anti-static or anti-adhesive properties that resist dust accumulation, pointing toward homes that are inherently easier to keep clean. Improved understanding of the relationship between dust bunny harbored allergens and the development of allergic disease may contribute to new prevention strategies for conditions like asthma and allergic rhinitis that affect hundreds of millions of people worldwide. The dust bunny, in its humble way, sits at the intersection of all these streams of inquiry, waiting for the science and technology of the future to reveal still more of its secrets. In closing, the dust bunny represents something that is at once entirely mundane and genuinely extraordinary. It is found in virtually every home, recognized by virtually every person, and yet contains within its fluffy structure a world of scientific complexity, historical depth, cultural significance, and practical importance. To understand the dust bunny fully is to appreciate the invisible forces that shape our physical environment, the biological communities that share our homes, the health implications of the invisible world we inhabit, and the ingenuity with which human beings have responded to the challenges posed by household dust. The dust bunny is not just under the bed, it is at the heart of the domestic world, and through it we can see the larger world reflected in miniature with all its complexity, its connections, and its endlessly surprising depth. Dust bunny management has also intersected with the evolution of interior design philosophy over the decades. Mid-century modern design, with its preference for low-profile furniture and open floor plans, inadvertently created environments that could be challenging for dust bunny control. Long, low sofas with minimal clearance above the floor created difficult-to-reach spaces where dust could accumulate undisturbed for months. The Scandinavian minimalist tradition, which emphasizes clean surfaces, restricted ornamentation, and easy to clean materials, can be partly understood as a design philosophy that takes dust management seriously, privileging surfaces and arrangements that facilitate maintenance. The trend toward raised furniture on legs, beds, sofas, and storage units that allow a vacuum cleaner to pass underneath reflects a pragmatic recognition of the dust bunny problem and an architectural response to it. Conversely, the trend toward built-in furniture with storage units that extend to the floor without any gap eliminates the under-furniture spaces where dust bunnies accumulate but creates other challenges. The dust that would otherwise collect underneath the furniture must now go somewhere else. And built-in units that seal against the floor can themselves trap dust and become difficult to clean thoroughly. The relationship between furniture design and dust bunny management is a genuinely practical consideration that good interior designers take into account, even if it is rarely explicitly discussed in design publications. The materials used in the construction of furniture, flooring, and textiles also affect the composition and behavior of the dust bunnies that form in their vicinity. Natural wood floors, with their grain and texture, can trap fine particles in small surface irregularities, while polished synthetic floors provide a smoother surface from which particles are more readily swept. Wool carpets, which are naturally more static resistant than synthetic carpets, may generate less electrostatically charged dust than nylon or polyester carpeting. Natural fiber upholstery tends to shed different types of lint than synthetic upholstery, with implications for the texture and composition of nearby dust bunnies. The comprehensive understanding of dust bunny formation therefore requires knowledge not just of physics and biology, but also of materials science and interior design. The monitoring and measurement of household dust levels has become increasingly sophisticated in recent years. Traditional methods relied on visual inspection, the presence of visible dust deposits and dust bunnies being the primary indicator, or on simple gravimetric methods in which a known surface area was wiped and the collected material weighed. Modern approaches can use optical particle counters to measure the concentration of airborne particles of different sizes in real time, providing a detailed picture of indoor air quality that changes minute by minute as occupants move through the space and carry out various activities. Some sophisticated air quality monitoring systems now track PM 2.5, particles smaller than 2, 5 micrometers and PM 10, particles smaller than 10 micrometers concentration continuously, alerting occupants when levels exceed recommended threshold and documenting the effects of cleaning activities on indoor air quality. Research using such monitoring systems has revealed some counterintuitive results about cleaning activities. Vacuuming, for instance, can temporarily increase airborne particle concentrations in a room as the mechanical action of the vacuum cleaner disturbs settled dust and the exhaust air from poorly filtered vacuum cleaners redistributes fine particles into the air. The use of vacuum cleaners with inadequate filtration can thus make indoor air quality temporarily worse during the cleaning process, even as it removes bulk dust deposits from floor surfaces. This research has contributed to the widespread adoption of HEPA-filtered vacuum cleaners and has highlighted the importance of considering the air quality implications of cleaning activities, not just their surface cleaning effectiveness. The interaction between smoking and dust bunny formation adds another dimension to the health implications of these domestic accumulations. In homes where tobacco smoking occurs, the particles and chemical compounds in tobacco smoke become part of the household dust, including the dust bunnies that form under furniture. Third-hand smoke, the residual contamination from tobacco smoke that settles on surfaces and becomes embedded in dust, can persist in a home for months or years after smoking has ceased, and children who play on floors and contact dust are exposed to these contaminants through ingestion and skin contact. The removal of smoking contaminated dust bunnies is an important but often overlooked component of efforts to reduce third-hand smoke exposure, particularly in homes with young children. The use of chemical dust control agents in industrial and agricultural settings provides an interesting contrast to domestic dust management approaches. In environments such as coal mines, grain elevators, and construction sites, water misting, chemical suppressants, and local exhaust ventilation systems are used to control dust concentrations and prevent the formation of explosive or hazardous dust clouds. These industrial approaches operate on the same fundamental principles as domestic dust management, reducing the concentration of airborne particles, preventing their aggregation into potentially harmful accumulations, but at a scale and with a level of engineering rigor that reflects the severity of the hazards involved. The lessons learned in industrial dust control have informed domestic dust management recommendations, just as domestic observations about dust behavior have contributed to the broader scientific understanding of particulate matter dynamics. The question of when a house is too dusty and what constitutes an acceptable level of dust bunny accumulation is one that lacks a definitive scientific answer. Health standards for household dust exposure are less well developed than those for industrial and outdoor air quality, reflecting both the difficulty of monitoring household environments and the heterogeneity of domestic dust composition. General recommendations from health authorities tend to emphasize regular cleaning, particularly vacuuming with high quality filters, as the primary strategy for maintaining acceptable dust levels. For individuals with diagnosed dust mite allergies or asthma, more intensive recommendations apply, including the use of allergen-proof mattress and pillow covers, the removal of carpets and heavy drapes where possible, and regular washing of bedding at high temperatures. The development of more specific, evidence-based guidance for household dust management remains an important goal for environmental health research. The global dimension of household dust and dust bunny formation points to the way in which local domestic environments are connected to large-scale environmental processes. Saharan dust carried across the Atlantic Ocean by prevailing winds has been detected in indoor dust samples from homes in the Caribbean and North America. Mineral dust from arid regions of Asia contributes to household dust levels in Japan and Korea. Radioactive fallout from nuclear tests conducted during the mid 20th century left detectable isotopic signatures in household dust samples collected around the world. The dust under the furniture in any home is thus, in a subtle but real way, a product not just of the activities within that home but of processes occurring thousands of kilometers away. A reminder that even the most private and domestic of environments is connected to the wider world. The future study of dust bunnies holds promise for advances across multiple scientific and practical domains. More detailed molecular characterization of household dust composition using the tools of environmental genomics and analytical chemistry will continue to reveal new components with health implications and new connections to broader environmental processes. Advances in nanotechnology may produce new materials with anti-static or anti-adhesive properties that resist dust accumulation, pointing toward homes that are inherently easier to keep clean. Improved understanding of the relationship between dust, bunny harbored allergens, and the development of allergic disease may contribute to new prevention strategies for conditions like asthma and allergic rhinitis that affect hundreds of millions of people worldwide. The dust bunny, in its humble way, sits at the intersection of all these streams of inquiry, waiting for the science and technology of the future to reveal still more of its secrets. In closing, the dust bunny represents something that is at once entirely mundane and genuinely extraordinary. It is found in virtually every home, recognized by virtually every person, and yet contains within its fluffy structure a world of scientific complexity, historical depth, cultural significance, and practical importance. To understand the dust bunny fully is to appreciate the invisible forces that shape our physical environment, the biological communities that share our homes, the health implications of the invisible world we inhabit, and the ingenuity with which human beings have responded to the challenges posed by household dust. The dust bunny is not just under the bed, it is at the heart of the domestic world, and through it we can see the larger world reflected in miniature with all its complexity, its connections, and its endlessly surprising depth.